So welcome to the Embodiment podcast, yoga and meditation channel. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. And it's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who you are and how you live. These episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today. My name is Karin van Manen, and a very warm welcome because on the show today we have Emma Slade, aka Annie Pema Deki, her Buddhist name. Emma is a Buddhist nun, an inspirational speaker, an executive coach, yoga and meditation teacher, and chief executive of the charity Opening Your Heart to Bhutan. She is also a qualified chartered financial analyst, and she went to art college too. So she's done quite a lot of stuff.
Either that or I'm 140 years old, you know.
Yes, this meditation makes you look very young, apparently. So maybe your evidence is that. Emma's written a book about her journey which is subtitled From Banking to Buddhism, because a deep-seated desire to inquire more deeply into the aspects of humanity arose following a life-changing trip to Jakarta, where she was held hostage. And afterwards, in the aftermath of that, she resigned from her high-flying career and began to explore different things to promote her own well-being after this traumatic episode. She became a yoga and meditation teacher and eventually went to Bhutan, a trip I was actually with her on because Emma was my second yoga teacher. We met in 2004. So you can read a lot more about that in her book, Set Free. And maybe she'll tell us a bit more about this in this interview. So there's so many things we could talk about because we know each other quite well, having done quite a lot of traveling together, and I work for your charity. But usually we start with the question of how did your interest in embodied practices, and in your case, spiritual practices, where did it first begin? Because I think it began before all this stuff happened.
Oh yeah,
Bhutan and Jakarta.
Yeah, it began
right?
here. It began here with this lying Buddha that was in the house I was born into, and definitely that is where it began.
Yeah, and that belonged to your grandfather.
That's
right.
Yeah, that's right. And that's I don't know if I suppose normally one thinks a journey begins with a place or a person or a text, but in my case it definitely began with this statue, this like looking at the face of a Buddha in the statue. So yeah, I would say that's definitely the starting place.
But Emma's, if you're just listening on the podcast, we're doing it on Zoom. She's pointing at this amazing, I think it's from Burma, right?
Yes, that's
Burmese,
right, lying Buddha.
Ancient, well, it looks pretty ancient statue of the Buddha. So when you saw it as a child, did you start asking questions about who it was? And
that's a really good question. No, I just said I would like that with me, and insisted, even as a young child, that the statue, which you can see is like made gold-colored wood, and it's quite a precious object, and I asked that it could be in my room, my bedroom, and my mother allowed that, and so I didn't really ask anything about it in terms of what was it or where did it come from. I didn't really ask anything like that. I just kind of felt very strongly, okay, that is sort of for me, or that's not exactly mine, but that is definitely I want that near me, kind of thing. And particularly the face, is it just really intrigued me. I think the face, very serene, and then the eyes, because the eyes are partially open in this kind of crescent moon shape. And then was he wearing a hat? Is that hair? These sort of little dots and coils on the head, and these very long ears. I don't know, the face, looking at this sort of carved face of the Buddha, just felt incredibly amazing and kind of important to me, I think, even from a young child. So it's been with me ever since, and you can see it's right by me here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wonderful. And then you went to art college and financial college, and you became very kind of high flying financial analyst, maybe a qualification people wouldn't expect a Buddhist nun to have. Obviously kind of preceded your current vocation. So how did it all come about? How did you go from having that statue in your bedroom to art college to doing something much more commercial and on from there?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? But I mean, I was growing up in the sort of 70s, and my mother did buy me a book with a brown dust cover and a Buddha on it when I was about 11, which I really treasured. But besides that, it's the 70s. There's no podcast, there's no Google, there's no sort of Buddhist things that were easy to find. And so it's not like today, where so much of these wonderful things are available so easily to so many. I mean, that's the wonderful thing. Even your podcast, it's like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I think I'm not asking for a different path, but I guess if I had been born in a Buddhist country at that point, then things would have taken off immediately. But clearly my connection is also with Bhutan, and Bhutan didn't even really open. It wasn't really open for a long time. So I guess I had to wait and live a life and discover, many things in the outer world about jobs and people and difficulties and careers and relationships and making choices. So I had this opportunity to experience all of that, which I feel is very helpful in my current role, to be honest. And so I after the death of my father, I felt this strong inclination to sort of stand on my own 2 feet, and that's when I ended up being in the world of investments, and it was very interesting. It was very, very interesting. It's about as worldly as you can get.
Yeah.
And but then after Jakarta, after being held hostage, as you say, everything, from a Buddhist point of view, we talk about seeing things as an illusion, or seeing the illusory nature of things. In a way, that's what happened after Jakarta. All these things, these clothes, these job titles, these running around, it's like they became illusory and when they dropped away, then I was really able more to enter the path that I probably was meant to be on, I suspect. And
I think you're right that all those experiences you had, all sorts of relationships, professionally, personally, because you're also a mum, you have a son, and I think often I really can relate really well to teachers who have had that kind of life experience, who know what it's like to be in the world, to be meditating one moment and the next moment you get a call from school, you've got to pick up your kid, or the next moment you've got to deal with the bank or whatever. So how do you think that's really helping you to help others, all those experiences, and experience of trauma maybe in there as well?
I do feel like I've lived about 46 lives already in this life, you know what I mean? So I think any I think those rounded experience does help you develop empathy for others. It does help you have a suppler mind that helps you, hopefully put yourself in other people's shoes more easily. Not to pretend you know their experience, but to be able to not be too fixed and have a suppler mind when it comes to others. I think it's also given me a great sense of the courage needed to make deliberate choices in our lives. And I think that can be helpful for other people as well. And ultimately, from a yoga point of view, the whole of a human being has these 5 koshas, 5 layers. And so I think that, whatever you call it, spirituality or the profound nature of a human, whatever it is, it's in each of us, but it's in each of us, as you know from your embodied work, in the form of a physical body and a pranic body, a subtle energy body, a mind which has many layers and many kind of depths to it. So I think the range of my experience has helped me to get that holistic sense of a human, and it allows me, I hope, to adapt my teachings wisely to the people who come in front of me,
Yeah, and in embodiment, we do also talk about the layers of embodiment, similar to physical, emotional body, subtle body, mind, and also the cultural experience, the social experience, everything that's going to be behind us from this life and our ancestors. And I guess Tibetan Buddhists would also think maybe previous lives are in there. It's all affecting who we are today. And in embodiment,
affecting and also offering opportunity, not just affecting, offering possibility.
Yeah, I like that, because we often talk about in embodiment about awareness, having awareness of how we are with all of that, and then how we want to be. What is the opportunity in it? What's the gold in it? And then making that conscious choice to how we want to be in the world. And I know you've done quite a lot of teaching and coaching on purpose, like life purpose. So in relation to people's well-being and happiness, how important do you think that is to have a sense of purpose, of being in service to something that you believe in, that someone can believe in?
Yeah, I think it's very important, and I think it is in a way in integral to the human journey of possibility. What is that book by that man that went into Auschwitz?
Viktor Frankl.
Yes, that's right. And he spoke really eloquently, I think, about meaning and how meaning can be so energizing. I mean, we might call it purpose now, but it just in terms of getting through the trials and obstacles and the just plain difficulty of a human life sometimes. He spoke about how, of all the things, a sense of meaningness, a sense of being meaningful, that there were meaningful things for him to do in the world, to contribute to the world, was so important to motivate him. And I think that's extremely true. It just depends the kind of the wideness of the landscape that we put it in. So from a Buddhist point of view, we don't particularly have to think about our purpose, to be honest. Our ultimate purpose is to free ourselves from suffering and develop a stable, compassionate, wise mind, etc., and to do that for the benefit of others. So that's pretty much done. I don't spend a lot of my time wondering what my purpose is. I spend more time thinking what's the best method, how to be skillful in bringing that about. But the purpose I don't have to really ask, because it's pretty much set. And yeah, so does that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't remember you telling me once you gave a student some homework, because you teach yoga and or more meditation these days, and you teach on Buddhist principles, and someone wanted to learn meditation, and I think the first thing you asked them to do was to do something kind for someone else once a day for so many days. I found that really interesting, also from an embodiment point of view, because I think a lot of people might nowadays think, oh, well, meditation's about sitting still, maybe with an app and trying to clear my mind. And that was, for me, was about going into action, into the world, embodying some kind of kindness. So yeah, I'm really curious.
Yeah, they didn't do the practice, they didn't do the homework, because they didn't want to do that. So in that instance, I genuinely thought that was the way for them to expand their sense of the self and what was possible, but they didn't choose to do it, actually. But I genuinely thought that would have been a helpful thing to do.
Yeah.
I've also, I'm known, if people are very low, if they're very emotionally low and they want to get meditation advice from me, I don't usually encourage them to meditate when they're emotionally low. And I can definitely remember advising somebody to help their elderly neighbor with their garden, and thinking, gosh, they're not going to like this idea. And she came back later and said that was just brilliant, and I got to know my neighbor, and it was so great to be outdoors, and I was caring for plants, watching them grow, fresh air. And she realized that hopefully was a helpful instruction, versus me giving her some sort of theoretical meditation advice, and then maybe she bought another book, and then her head went round and round. So I think the role of the teacher is to try and be skillful and honor the student, but also realize sometimes if they're about to walk into a cul-de-sac, because you've probably been there yourself, from my own experience. So I do things like that. But ultimately, it's always going to be up to the student whether they choose to explore that or not, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from embodiment, trauma aware perspective, we do get a lot of students in our work who are struggling, maybe not trauma, it could be some other mental health issue, anxiety, depression. And actually meditation isn't always helpful, as you say. It might bring up the difficult stuff even more.
And when we talk about the importance of feeling meaningful, we find meaning, often joyful meaning, in relation to others, in connection with others. Well, that's certainly from the Viktor Frankl book. And I think it's really, really true. And often if people are feeling depressed, what happens is they begin to isolate themselves from others, and their confidence starts to go down, their sense of their own value starts to diminish, and then they become more and more isolated. And whereas knowing one's connection to others, feeling it, knowing it's meaningful, which is done as an alive thing, it's so essential and so helpful. If somebody's in a bad place, it's very unlikely that meditation is going to be the best thing to do. A meditation in a maybe how you might imagine it, sort of on your own, in quiet, that is probably not going to be the best medicine at that point, I think.
So you would encourage anyone who's listening that might be thinking about meditation in coming from that kind of place, because they've heard it's going to be good for them, but they're struggling at the moment, to maybe do something that's kind and will connect them with others.
Definitely. And, you know, the first stages of meditation are to stabilize the mind, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're to feel less driven by the you know, the distraction of worrying thoughts. And we can do basic meditation or mindfulness practice for that. Sorry, I got a slight cough. But we can do many other things that give us similar results. And I think one thing I hope is that neuroscience will begin to look more at the scientific evidence for the benefit of gardening, of stroking your pet, of being absorbed in baking. You know, because all of these wonderful things encourage our parasympathetic nervous system. If they're things of joy, they give us this strong memory of joy, which is so important, and they're there on our doorstep. You know, and it can be led by you rather than feeling like I should meditate. You know, and sort of planting it on yourself. If you more think, what brings me to a more absorbed and joyful place, and just think it could be anything. I mean, it could be flying a kite for all I know. And I think to know ourselves best, what will most help ourselves, you just have to ask that question: where am I at my most relaxed, my most joyful, my most absorbed? And my mind seems to naturally become less busy. And I just hope everybody can answer that question. And then if they can, then usually it's just a question of really seeing it for what it is, valuing it. And if you need to rename it as meditation, rename it as meditation, if that helps you, you know. If you don't know what that thing is, then set about finding it.
Yeah, good advice. And when we started the interview, Emma had her cat socks on her lap. I don't know if he's still there.
He's moved off to a rather deliciously luxurious blanket over there, one of my meditation blankets. So he's abandoned us, but he does like to be part of the show.
Yeah. And I really like that, you know, you often post things on Facebook, you and a friendly dog or cat, because you seem to have a very joyful connection with animals. And
and you know, love is very, you know, love is very much a part of meditation, although it may not appear it at first. So and that's about emotional well-being, isn't it? Love is so essential for our emotional well-being. It's so essential if there's been trauma. And so I love animals, and I feel that gushes out of me very easily. It's always been very easy for me to love animals, not always so easy to love other things. So I've gone where the you know, the easy path is for me, you know.
Yeah, because then we can really feel it in our bodies, that because it's real, it's authentic, and it's spontaneous.
Natural.
There's a really
natural.
Cute, very natural. And I think for me it was then easier to recognize it in other moments where maybe it was more subtle, or there was perhaps a little bit of struggle somewhere with it as well, but to kind of find that nugget of joy, and by focusing on it and nourishing it with different activities and practices to kind of make it blossom.
Yeah, you sound like you've thought about it a lot, more than I have, I realise now.
I don't think so. But I think often when my mind's very busy or a bit overshadowed by to-do lists or some other emotions, sometimes it's wonderful to come back to something simple and nourishing, like looking at a beautiful thing in nature, the sky, and kind of noticing I can experience struggle and joy at the same time, basically, and I can balance each other out. So yeah, I was thinking of our first trip. We've mentioned Bhutan, and if anybody doesn't know where Bhutan is, don't worry, a lot of people don't know where Bhutan is. It's a tiny Buddhist kingdom in the Himalayas, nestled next to Nepal, Emma's looking slightly sad because she
Yeah.
hasn't been able to go there when we're doing this interview. It is still very much pandemic times, so it's been a while. We went on a trip there, which was organized by Emma in 2011, when she was still in skinny jeans and kitten heels, I remember.
With hair. Don't forget about the hair.
The hair, yeah, and you had long hair. So it's pretty much 10 years ago this autumn, right?
It was 2011, and we walked into Dochala in early November. Was it the 28th of October? It was around the 28th of October that we walked into Dochala together. I think we walked into the temple together, right?
Yes, we did. Yeah. Yeah, and it was a bit of a pilgrimage for me as well. It turned out to be very life-changing for you, because you met your one of your main teachers then, or really the person that guided you towards having this life, monastic life.
In fact, I texted him today. And because I just finished teaching a retreat, and now I can message him, whereas at the time it was like impossible. And I because I think about that time, and I messaged him today. I said, "You are my Lama, and it will always be this way." And he answered, "Thank you so much. I'm a simple and humble monk, and you are considered as your own Lama. But we are Dharma friends." So yeah.
So it really from looking at it externally and reading your book, which says a lot more about that whole episode and what happened before and after. So people should read that if they want to know all the ins and outs. But from my perspective, that was quite a big change from, you were already a yoga teacher, meditation teacher, and really quite far down the line of practice and teaching. But then partly as a result of meeting this teacher, Lama means teacher, deciding to renunciate your normal life.
I mean, I didn't decide to do it. A Lama instructed me to do it.
Right.
So I think, although, when I was much younger, I had shaved my hair off when I was much younger. And I think obviously there were little signs there that the road sign might go towards a Buddhist nun. Because I had already had a child, I thought, I hadn't even considered it, because I thought, well, that's not an option anymore. That's a dead end now. And so I think it's important to know that, because for many people, the question of to be a monastic or not is something that they churn over. They really think about and wonder and question and think, should they, could they, do they want to? And for me, I'd never done any of that, because I'd had a child, and I just thought, not possible. So it was Lama's very clear instruction, based, I believe, on a kind of a dream or a vision they'd had, that he didn't share with me, but somebody else told me about. And so it was an instruction from him. It was an instruction which caused me to burst into tears. And obviously I wasn't going to say no, but it really wasn't my idea, actually. And there's a relief in that, because, as I say, many people, especially Western people, they may consider wanting a monastic path, and then it becomes a very big question for them, and they become quite churned up about it. So I'm quite lucky that I didn't have to go in that way,
Yeah, and that might seem also quite strange, or I can't quite think of the word, to listeners, that you were told to become a nun, and it sounds like there was no doubt that you should follow what he instructed.
Yeah, I had no doubt. I had no doubt. Yeah, I had no doubt. And I've had a lot of doubt in my life. I have the kind of mind that, thinks, I mean, before that, even in my yoga career, I still had the kind of mind of like, shall I go out with him? Shall I not? Shall I go for that job? Shall I not? Shall I go on holiday? Shall I not? I have that kind of mind before. And so for such a big thing, you'd think I would have absolutely gone into that mindset, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it's just a special thing.
Yeah, there's in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a lot of practice of devotion, which again, if people are not familiar, is, you know, the being devoted to a teacher and to Buddhism as a practice is something that, you know, isn't necessarily naturally arising all the time. It's often something we work at, and we've got to find the right teacher, someone we fully trust. And
that's really important. That didn't happen in my case. I had instant thing, instant noodles kind of approach to Lama. But I think that's very right, and it's right to be cautious and to research, and the teacher is also supposed to research the student. And I think there was a little bit of researching me from Lama's part, but I knew something very profound was connecting, and I didn't really need to question my faith, which I realize sounds a bit stupid, maybe, or too trusting, or could make you in a dodgy way, something. But it didn't feel like that. What it felt was that he had seen something in me that even I hadn't seen in myself, and I knew it was the best of me.
And that's really the meaning of the word namaste as well, isn't it? I see the Buddha in you. It's on t-shirts now and coffee mugs, etc. But it's that kind of recognition, some kind of recognition, which sadly, you know, as you quite rightly say, we should be cautious, can also be abused by teachers.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm, you know, as a teacher myself now, I'm very cautious. In terms of teaching people Buddhism, I usually say no, go find someone else, you know, because either way, whether you're the student or the teacher, it's a very serious commitment, and it's something which could go on for many, many lifetimes, not just for the next couple of days. So I'm actually very cautious. And Lama, I said to Lama, you know, have you got a new student now? He said, no, I don't, no more students. That you were enough. He said, you enough. Not quite sure how to take that, but I think that just shows you that he wasn't looking for students. I wasn't looking for a teacher, and neither of us have done anything like this since, you know.
Yeah, some kind of meant to be serendipity. Yeah,
I think you know, I think so.
I think that element of commitment, devotion to a path can sound really wonderful, and I've had times in my life where I think I was more devoted, more committed. I'm always quite committed, but life does lead me a little off the straight and narrow direct path sometimes, I think, but some of those diversions turn out to be educational. But I think
I don't know, I mean, you must think of it as you do, but if one is clear on, you know, on where one is going, like I say, to free your own mind from suffering and help many other beings, then as long as that stays forefront in one's mind, then it's just method. It's not really wandering off. It's just a different method at that point. If one keeps that basic understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, is that the idea that everything can become a teacher?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, potentially. And so I think, I don't know, do I think that some things are a distraction and others aren't? I'm not sure that I think that. I'd have to mull that one over, I think. I mean, the obvious distractions like getting drunk and falling over in the street or whatever, you know, obviously. But no, I mean, on some level, I might have to think about that, I think.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, isn't it? So there's some distractions which turn out not to be, like a knock on the door, oh no, a distraction, and then might be a friend in need, and that turns out to be a really good thing. And other distractions.
And if you define that knock at the door as a distraction, you will approach it in a meaner way, in a less open way. So I do think we need to be careful around this.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've noticed in you and also other Buddhist teachers, I've seen the Dalai Lama do it, for example, that being really present with people, in your case also dogs, it's like nothing's really a distraction when you're practicing being really present in a compassionate way in that moment with whoever it is. And that seems a really beautiful way to live, actually, when I witnessed that.
I think if you're going to live peacefully with reality, there is no other way. And I think if we're very binary about distraction, we could end up with the mind quite judging of itself, quite harsh, quite judging of others. So I think it's really worth exploring, actually.
Yeah, and I also notice when I'm in that frame where, like, I'm so focused because I'm in doing mode and I've got a deadline or something, it's like a bit like wearing blinkers, and then everything else becomes a distraction that is very binary and black and white. So that's
there's stages. This is why talking about the mind or the mind stream it's quite tricky to talk about in a generalistic way. And this is, I think, why in the Buddhist tradition, so many teachings are given orally between the teacher and the student in a very unique way, because all of our minds are at different points of development, struggling with different things, different levels of stability, different levels of joy. And so you need some general things can be said, but there has to be quite a lot of tweaking. And so when we use words like distraction or whatever some of these words are, it will depend on the context of that mind stream of and the understanding, the wisdom, compassion at that point,
Yeah. And we're talking about the mind, and from the embodied perspective, there's so at the very least so much interaction between whatever mind is, that's a whole huge topic in itself, and the nervous system and the body. What's the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, as you understand it, of embodying a compassionate, present way of being? Is it more of a thing you do with the mind, or do we bring the body into it?
No, you definitely, we're a whole being with a body and a breathing system, whether you call it nervous system or whether you call it like a pranic system from the yogic point of view, and then that links over to the mind. So we want them to work well together. That's the point. They can hold each other back, or they can be good companions on the way. We want them to work well, like as a team, for a long while. Lama always says to me, now I do everything just with my mind. And I think that, but for a long time, the whole team has to really be friendly with each other and work together. But in the end, whatever you call the mind or the mind stream will be the most important, because from a Buddhist point of view, or yogic point of view. We read the yogic text exactly the same, because the subtle consciousness will leave the physical body. So how we've dealt with it, how we've how do you call it, like been the custodian of it, in terms of the body and the pranic system and the thoughts that we've had and the skills we've learned to keep ourselves completely well, they're going to impact the nature of the subtle consciousness. But ultimately, the subtle consciousness will leave the body. The body is compound phenomena. The nervous system is compound phenomena. But while all of these elements are together, they should work as a really wonderful team.
Yeah, and this is, of course, one of the things in embodiment. The body will deteriorate. It's a big practice in all schools of Buddhism, I think, and yoga, to be aware of that impermanent nature of the body, and at the same time, certainly from the embodiment perspective, and it sounds similar what you're saying, to take really good care of it, not to just diss it because it's gonna die.
That's right. It's impermanent. We can realize it's impermanent, but we can also realize that it's elemental, and reality, one level of reality is elemental, right? It's like the flesh is like the earth, and the moisture in the body is like the water of the river, and the heat of the body is like fire. So yes, it's impermanent, but it's also none other than the nature of the reality on some level too. So that can help us maybe feel, it's impermanent, but it's also connected. It's the nature of reality around me. I have it in common. These elements, I have it in common with what I see in the garden, and the sky is like the space element. This river is the water element that I also have. So there's maybe that also adds another interesting dimension to this point.
And some of our listeners might have experienced some of the embodying the elements work on some of our courses, where we bring a lot of awareness to those elements in the body and action,
good. And that will enable us to be more careful with the rivers and the earth, our own, but also the others,
and much more connected to not just other people but also nature. Those practices can be so simple and yet really, really profound, I think, when we really sense those elements inside of us and around us. In terms of your monastic practice, again, maybe you could tell the listeners a bit about what your life looks like, because they might be thinking at this point that you're probably in a monastery, but you're not, right?
No, I'm definitely not in a monastery right now, particularly because of the time of COVID. And so I have been lucky enough to spend time in monastic situations in Bhutan, but all throughout this last 10 years, I've still juggled being a mother with monastic duties, and that's been a reality for me. And I've spent much time behind the boundary of a monastic institution, and I enjoy it. But I'm also aware that there's something in me which really likes connecting to people, and I love talking to people, and I love sharing things, and obviously I set up the charity. That's extremely important to me. And so somehow I feel very peaceful and relaxed at being behind a boundary, but I also feel very comfortable and being the other side of the boundary and sharing. And I kind of like the way they work together, I think. I like the way they kind of support each other. But in the last 2 years with COVID, I haven't been able to be in Bhutan, as you know, although I'm hoping to go shortly. and just deal with the quarantine period.
Yeah.
And but I think I'm not, you know, a lot of people who meet me say, oh, you're nothing like I thought a nun was going to be. And I think that's partially because, you know, I like to have a sort of sense of humor. I like to be very approachable. You know, I like people, and I'm quite active, I'm quite energetic. And so I think for me, it's been about balancing behind a boundary and outside a boundary in my particular path.
Yeah, and yeah, it might surprise people, like it surprised you initially that you can be a monastic if you've had a family. There's in at least in some of the sort of more modern Tibetan Buddhist approaches, there are options to integrate these two
yeah, if you're
approaches.
going to, you need to be an extremely strong person.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think it's extremely lucky that I had Lama and that strength of connection was there. If it wasn't, I think it would have been, could have been very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I have met one or two other monastics who were trying to do something similar, maybe caring for elderly parents, or you know, having sort of a foot in both camps, and it's not easy. And you are a renunciate, so you've taken all the monastic vows, and in fact you are the first and so far only Western nun to be ordained in Bhutan. So you're
in the Drukpa Kagyu lineage. Apparently there's an American lady, I think, who's was ordained in the Nyingma lineage in Bhutan. So I always try to get this really, really accurate.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm definitely the only Western woman for the Drukpa Kagyu lineage, which is the main lineage in a way in Bhutan. And so it's the lineage of the thunder dragon, and it's the lineage with the emphasis on the oral instruction, hence Kagyu, Ka means mouth. So yeah, it's that way. That's also why it's very important for me to be in the country in order to gain the oral instructions from my teacher. Yes. There's no way that my teacher, who now it's the teacher who gave me my vows, there's no way he's going to be on Zoom. So I have to physically go to Bhutan for any teachings to sit with him.
Yeah. So in terms of renunciation, so you've renunciated, is that the
renounced
word? Renounced.
Yeah.
Certainly have renounced romantic sexual relationships, and there's lots of other vows, like you're not allowed to dance, I believe, unless it's a religious dance. So again, that might sound really difficult to some of our listeners, and I think I used to think that it might kind of cut a part of myself off if I renounced certain elements of my life. I did have a long period of celibacy or abstinence, because it wasn't a celibacy vow, but abstinence. And actually found, you know, it does free up a lot of time and energy for other things. And you certainly, to me, seem like someone who's very alive. So how has it been for you to make that choice?
The celibacy thing, you mean, or generally renouncing?
Yeah, all those vows, like really making a vow not to. Well, coming back to that word distraction, not necessarily distraction, but
yeah, it's been fairly easy. There's been a couple of times when it's been harder, you know, because nearly 10 years now, so that's a long time. So it's been fairly easy. I think, you know, I think from the outside, renunciation may appear very much as you're losing everything. It's all about what you haven't got.
Yeah.
But I think from a practitioner's point of view, you know, your aim is to bring out the best in you, what we would call your Buddha nature, right? And so you look at those things in terms of, okay, so would drinking alcohol bring out my Buddha nature? Unlikely, you know. might bring out a karaoke queen, but it's not likely to bring out a Buddha nature, you know. And then would being in a very much a one-to-one relationship where a lot of your focus is on that other person, would that really fulfill the idea of becoming a compassionate and wise person helping many beings? I mean, it could do, but it's definitely not necessarily going to. And so it's really like that. You've said you with integrity, you're going to try to free yourself from anger, from greed, from being selfish, and then you just find the methods to help you do that. And so living simply, where you're not thinking about lots of clothes and, you know, sort of that things that, you know, don't fit with that goal, they can fall away quite easily, I think, actually, to be honest. And I mean, sometimes it's tough. You have to be a strong person. You have to be a strong person. You know, that's why being monastic is definitely not for everyone. You can be a profound practitioner. You can, you know, you become an enlightened being. You can help many beings in any form. You don't need to be wearing robes. But for certain people, I think it helps us to wear robes. It helps us to it's just the right way. And I think, I don't know how, having been born in Whitstable, done this and done this, I don't know how it ended up being the right way for me. But you know, it is. And yeah, but it's not the right way for everyone. The point is to find the right way for your own being, you know, in this particular time.
Yeah.
And I think you know that very well, Karin, because you've considered different ways and different options. You thought carefully about it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it still sometimes, you know, seems like a wonderful thing to do, but it's not something, certainly in your experience, the way it's gone for you, it's not something you just do for a little bit, though there is some kind of trial period, right, where you take temporary vows.
There is in the West. There wasn't in Bhutan.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, so
it's pretty hardcore in Bhutan. But I mean, there are some countries, there are Buddhist countries, like in Thailand, you can enter a temple boundary and you can have a shaved head and wear a particular kind of clothing as a female. Say if you've lost a parent and you're grieving and you want to dedicate you know, a lot of goodness to them and pay full kind of respect to them without having to juggle things with work and whatever, you know, you can go in for like 3 months and take temporary vows. And monks in Thailand, they tend to do, men in Thailand tend to do quite regular periods of time within a temple. I think it maybe even be a regulation. I'm not too sure. But in Bhutan, it's a little bit more like you take your vows, you have taken your vows. I mean, some people don't decide to continue with that, and they will change their dress back. But it's definitely not like one of those round doors in a hotel, you know, where you can go in and out and in and out. It's definitely not like that. So yeah,
it does sound like a beautiful thing to do, as that as part of a grieving process, something like that, to really embody what you're practicing with the way you dress, what you do with your hair, not wearing jewelry. It's really bringing the whole body into it.
Yeah, one of the big differences that I see between the East and the West is how long they do a mourning period for. I mean, you know, as you know, from a Himalayan Buddhist point of view, it's going to be 49 days. And so friends of mine who have businesses in Bhutan, they know if somebody's parent has just died, they won't see them for at least 49 days. And this culture, which gives such respect to the person who's passed on, but also the need for the family and the community to do certain things, be together, and try to kind of get through that together. And having lost my father at quite a young age, it was such a shock to the system. And we had a few days, then we had to organize a funeral, then the funeral finished, and then it was like, and for me, it seems to be something very healthy about recognizing the profoundness of losing a very important human in your life and giving it that kind of time and attention. And I do notice in the East that seems to be easier to accomplish. And I think it's a very, I think there's something quite important in that,
Yeah, I love the rituals around that and around the Tibetan Buddhist practices. Like earlier you're saying, and you might find peace of mind from baking cakes, and people spend a lot of time on creating things for shrines. Butter sculptures is one thing, and that sense of ritual around important occasions, grief and also celebration, with the whole community coming together, is something that I really find is missing in modern life, or it's coming back a bit. People are exploring it a bit more in a more secular sense sometimes, because it's become something we've removed ourselves from, but I think really useful.
I think it's very supportive, when you're experiencing trauma or grief, the rug has been taken out from your life, isn't it? It's like the bottom's fallen out of your life, and therefore, if you have people around you, a community, friends, family, and they come to support you through that period, like hold you through it, we are likely as humans to need that, I think. I mean, you mentioned an important point there about the butter sculptures, and one thing I would say is that because a lot of meditation practices in the West have their origin maybe in Eastern practices, or maybe when you see like a monastic or whatever, you're most likely to think, oh, the main thing they do is meditate and pray, So it feels very like head orientated, or, that kind of thing. But, you raise a really important point, which may be useful for your embodiment ideas, is that monks exactly do what you say. They spend time making things with their hands. They make mandalas, they make offerings, they make butter tuomas, and they make caring for the shrine is very, important. And they also tend the garden of the temples, and they may plant trees, and they may plant their own vegetables, often in the temple, to sustain the community. And they also do very many household things, like wash things and wash floors and polish butter lamp things, and they'll make the butter lamps. They'll make with the ghee and the wick and the melting it and the pouring it. And so I think it could be really interesting for your project to think about some of these things, because I think there is this sense that the only thing that a master does is somehow meditate and pray. They don't. They do things with their hands, and they, and I think that they may paint tankers, they may make sculptures. There's like a sculpture class in Willaka for the nuns, where they learn to sculpt figures of Buddha. I mean, these are not abstract mental practices, and you make satsas, with the clay, satsas. And not that I pronounce it right, because they're really hard, that vow. And so maybe that needs a bit more understanding, and that gives it an embodied quality that I think would be appealing for your work. Yeah,
and I think again a way in for many people, to do something with their hands, making something in a mindful way. There's all these mindful coloring books you can get, which is kind of a sort of an example of that. If it's hard to sit still, or it's hard to do hatha yoga as we know it in mostly in the West, there's other ways of entering into this and also through karma yoga, or being in service, which you do a lot of as CEO of Opening Your Heart in Bhutan. Bit of a disclosure, I am treasurer of the charity, so
thank you, Karen. Thank you.
A plug here as well. If you buy Emma's book Set Free, it is a really good read. It's got lots of practice stuff in it, as well as her personal story, and it starts to introduce the charity, which has moved on a lot since the book was published in 2017. 4 years later, mostly single-handedly, I know there's a few instrumental trustees, but mostly single-handedly, you've persuaded donors to hand over nearly £450,000.
We're over that now. We're heading towards $500,000, which is yeah.
So here's the financial analyst comes out a little bit. Who has helped the charity a lot, your acumen in that area. But the charity helps children and families in Bhutan, mainly to enable children who otherwise couldn't to be able to go to school. And we do all sorts of things, from providing water filters to helping individual children to get to school. So that's really another one of your life's purposes, or what gives your life a lot of meaning, I think.
Yeah, and I think from an embodiment point of view, I've always said that it wasn't enough for me just to do the prayers about compassion. And I suppose you would interpret that decision with the charity as embodying those prayers in the world, and that's kind of how it felt to me. And it was important to me personally that I acted. And having done so many compassion prayers, and then the mandala offerings, and I just felt really compelled to do that.
I remember reading a joke in the Ladybird book of mindfulness, those jokey books about all sorts of things, and there's a cartoon of a guy, a friend asks him for some practical help, and he says he's too busy doing his loving kindness meditation. That's always struck me. That's that kind of distraction, isn't it? That's it's not quite right. So.
Yeah, I mean, it can, but there's always stages. You just hope the stage grows into another stage and doesn't get stuck there.
And how's the balance? Because I know you have periods of being extremely busy with that, and your son and your family, life in general. So how do you manage to, do you have any good tips on balancing your practice and maybe all these kind of pulls on your time to sometimes deal with heartbreaking stories and wanting to, I'm sure, jump up and do something right away for someone?
Do I have any tips? Well, recognize what you can't do and try desperately to get people to help you the bits you can't do. Recognize your strengths, and because if you keep trying to do something that is very hard for you, it becomes very exhausting. So I'm lucky to have you in my life, and also Sue Hills, who's the charity secretary. And so be smart about where you want to place your energy, what is your strength and what gives you joy, and then try to get people around you who have different strengths, and they can do those bits, and then together you can achieve much more than you ever imagined. So I definitely think that, as I described before, with being behind a boundary or outside a boundary, I think all humans need to step out from whatever their worldly activities are, whether it's in a 20-minute meditation practice, whether it's for a day retreat, whether it's for whatever it is, something that nourishes you, really nourishes you, and the more you do that, the easier it is to cope with many things outside the boundary wall, etc. Because, like my Lama said, you have to be your own Lama in the end,
Yeah.
And so I don't know if there's really tips, but there's a few points there. I'm also quite stubborn. probably helps. And just keep remembering the person you really wish to be, or the contribution you wish to make, the footprint you want to have left, and take it at the right pace, but don't forget it.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Wise. Is there like a small practice you could recommend to support people's practice of compassion, embodying compassion, like something someone could do every day to develop that inside themselves?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know about a practice. Oh, gosh, that's a big question, Karen. There's many answers. There's many answers I could give to that, and they would probably shift depending on who's near me and who's asking the question and their circumstances, because it has to all kind of arise together. But I think I noticed that when people feel threatened or anxious, it doesn't bring out the best in them, whether it's being compassionate, whether it's being patient, whether it's being generous. And so the most important thing to do is to relax the low abdomen if you haven't realized that it's begun to get tight. Relax the low abdomen, breathe for a moment, and you just come back to something simple which helps you. In terms of compassion itself, there's many things you can do. You can imagine, you can remind yourself what the world would be like without compassion. Just try to visualize it, and you can just see very quickly how ghastly it would be, and you can notice in your own life, where is it easiest for me to be compassionate? And because there will be some place. It might be your partner, your children, your animals, but there will be a place, because it's a natural part of a human. But once you realize it's naturally present, you can never be separated from it, because it does arise in certain circumstances. All you need to do is to just think, oh, I'm just going to go a little bit more. Do it in a way that works for you. So see where it naturally arises, like your strength, as I say, and just do a little bit more. Now that doesn't mean if you find, sorry, I must clarify that. It doesn't mean like if you find you're naturally very compassionate to your own children that you start smothering them to death. It means more like maybe be also a bit more compassionate to somebody else's child, or to like a child in another country, like Bhutan, for instance, said she being outrageous. Or I don't mean take the same group of people and be even more intensely focused on them. I mean widening.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like smothering your own child, like, I'm just being really compassionate to you now, can you see what a great compassionate mom I am? No, mom, leave me alone.
It stops being compassionate at that point, probably.
But but it's really important to know, okay, where does this quality in me naturally arise? Relax the abdomen. Where does it naturally arise? Okay, and then just
Yeah, and that sort of self-care, to have time for our practice, for me that's important, because I get overtired then, as you say, or then I get grumpy, and then it's hard to be
Then it causes suffering.
compassionate.
So then you have
Yeah.
to really recognize, ooh, it's causing suffering. Let's draw back, maybe draw up the drawbridge a bit, because if you carry on, you'll have things to regret. And that's very hard for the mind. Regret is very hard.
Yeah, indeed. So we've gone to pretty much an hour, I think.
Oh my goodness, it feels like it's
slightly
flown by.
over. And it's been a wonderful conversation about all sorts of things, from practice to Bhutan to grief rituals, and how to be more compassionate in our lives. So thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure, Karen.
Emma.
Great. Congratulations on all your work, and I wish the best for everybody listening in, and don't give up.
No way. And if you want to learn more about Emma, her website is emmaslade.com. The charity website is openingyourhearttobhutan.com. You can also find these in the podcast notes. You can order her book on Amazon, Set Free. If anyone's watching the video, that's what it looks like. Great read. A lot you can learn from that. So thank you, Emma Slade.